Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man Podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. I am, as always, your very, very grateful host. Folks, thank you so much for everything you've done. I know I begin every podcast like this. I hear from you guys all the time. You don't have to keep thanking everybody. We're here. I'm like, yeah. Well, one of the reasons I think you're still here is because I keep thanking you. So I want to make sure that you guys know, though, that ever since we made the move to 5 days, I could not be happier. I couldn't be more grateful for the way you've all stepped up. You are liking, sharing, subscribing, sending DMs. Folks, if you're not out there doing what you're doing, I don't get to sit here and do what I'm doing. So I'm eternally grateful for what you've done. All right. Now, that's over. I'm done thanking you guys. Now you all know what's coming. We got to make a couple of dollars. That's right. Here we go. We got to pay some bills. So let me take a sip of my preferred beverage so we can get to our wonderful guest who's got some really cool things to talk about today. Man, that is good. And if you're a friend of the program, and I know you are, you know what we're drinking. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Folks, go check them out. Look them up. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. They brew a mean bean. It's a fantastic cup of joe. They do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans, which is one of the biggest reasons why we support them. You guys all know how important veterans are to us here at the Power Man Podcast. So do they. So go check them out. Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. And when you do, and when you buy that big, huge bag of, beautiful roast, tell them Power Man sent you, will you? All right, good deal. Let me get another sip of this so I can keep up with this guy sitting across the table from me. I will be drinking that throughout the episode to keep me going because, when you get a little long in the tooth, like the Power Man is right now, you sometimes you need a little extra caffeine in the middle of your day. Folks, go check them out. Anyway, let's get right to it now. Folks, we have a fantastic guest with us today, author of the book 9 Steps to Build a Life of Meaning, How to Unlock Your Mind, Happiness, Power, and Your Enemies Demise. And I can't wait to hear about the end of that book title because that is incredibly unique and really got my attention. Folks, please welcome to the program, author Rick Walker. How you doing, Rick?
Doing well, Rory. It's blessed to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I cannot wait to hear about this book. I can't wait to hear about the title, especially the end of it, and everything else you have going on here. But before we get into that, let me just throw it to you and tell my audience, who is Rick Walker? What are you about? And what brings you here today, brother?
Well, it's great to be with you again. Rory, I grew up in a two-bedroom home down in Corpus Christi. Very faithful parents. My dad was out of work a good portion of my childhood, and so we went out and just did odd jobs. And I lead off the book talking about one of those odd jobs, which was watch collecting and watch trading, watch arbitrage. And we just had a great childhood. But as I got into my college years, I realized that I didn't want to have to struggle for money, struggle to kind of sort of make the way as I matured. And so I really tried to just do the opposite. I didn't have a vision of what I wanted. I tried to do the opposite of what I was brought up with. Had a wonderful childhood. My parents are amazing. They're still some of my best friends. Just a wonderful set of circumstances there. But monetarily, I also wanted something different. And so I started working sort of away from that vision of what I saw because I didn't have a vision to point at to. So I started working against what I didn't want. And so slowly but surely, by the time I was 26, I grew my first company from 0 to 400 employees. I grew a second company that I started into 6 states, helped a nonprofit scale into over 50 countries with thousands of team members, and then also did a lot of work in the charitable world. Generally, I would spend 8 hours a day working in my businesses, spend another 8 hours a day volunteering, generally at the board level or helping organizations fundraise that were generally faith-based. And so I found a lot of fulfillment in that. And over the years, over maybe the decade or so since a lot of those things transpired, I've had a chance to reflect on that and try to ascertain what sort of the key principles I had learned were. And I went back and I studied not only the Christian tradition, but also philosophy, ancient Greek culture, and also some other world religions as well, and the arts, and tried to come up with a synthesized version of how reality works, not only from the Christian perspective, but also from the philosophical perspective, in a way that sort of made sense based off of what I experienced and what I thought that I could improve based off of my experiences. And so I'm a man of inversion. So I think most of the people that you read in books, especially young men 25 to 45, they're theoreticians, they're academics, they're pontificators, And I'm coming from a doer perspective. I'm just a guy out there in the world trying to act and try to make stuff happen. Guy that fails a lot, guy that is redeemed on occasion, and the type of person that wants to really just share with men some of the lessons learned. Like we're just students in the same classroom, sitting, taking notes, and sharing our notes of what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so that's sort of the posture. That's the background of who I am.
I love that. I love that. Now you dropped a lot there, so let me kind of get caught up. Uh, I love that faith was a part of your background and still is a part of your life. It sounds like pretty strongly.
Yes. Yes.
And so yeah, like you and I discussed, this is an absolutely safe place to talk about that. I'm saying it out loud also because I want my listeners all to know that that's what this is about too. And that this is a good conversation to be having. As we move forward, though, with everything that you're talking about here, I've looked at some of the numbers, that were in your bio in terms of I started this company, I made this much, we turned it into this, 400 employees. I mean, um, where does that come from? Is that do you have a natural knack for that? Did you go to school for that and study exactly how to build these companies and make all this money? Because I know there's people out there who are like, they think that people like you who can have that kind of success are just sort of born with it and that you're like an anomaly and the normal guy can't go do that. True or false?
Oh, totally false. Totally false. I would say that I was probably the third millionaire that I had ever met. So I wasn't surrounded by a bunch of competent people. And I don't call myself a millionaire, but I'm just saying that just for perspective. Like I wasn't running around. I didn't have a network or anything. My dad was out of work. We lived in a two-bedroom house. Like it was pretty dire situation. But I had met my first millionaire because I worked for the guy when I think I was a junior and senior in high school. So I met the guy, and that was it. The second millionaire I met was probably my sophomore year of college. Was one of my professors who had started a side business, and he was one of the people that mentored me, encouraged me to read and to grow and explore and to take chances. And so I think those two people really had a profound impact on me. But at one point, I remember, 26 years old, I'm sitting there counting W-2s as we're getting ready to mail it out. And I think I counted 426 W-2s. Kind of easy to remember because I was 26 years old. But 426 W-2s, didn't have an office. I guess I had an office at my parents' house still. But didn't really have much. And I realized, like, I don't know anybody else that has 400 employees. Like I'm the first person. And so I realized very quickly that I need to find someone to learn from. I need to find a mentor. I need to find sort of a master to teach me the way. And so I started my search for that. That's a little bit what's in the book, Nine Steps to Build a Life of Meaning. But I didn't have a proclivity. I was a very friendless type of person. In fact, I was the type of person that when I was growing up, my middle school, my early high school years, I had a group of friends that were not good friends. I Just to give you an example, I remember playing pickup basketball at the park by my house, watching the weed in between 3-on-3 games because that like the person that rotated out watched the weed and make sure the right people picked it up. That was me. Um, and I remember one of my best friends when I was junior in high school. He had 6 children. He was a senior. He had 6 children by 6 different girls in the high school. Like
Wow.
that was the crowd I was hanging out with. And I realized in my junior year, I realized like I've got to cut this out. I wasn't partaking in any of those activities, but I've got to get rid of that. And so I slowly realized it's not who you hang out with, but it's who you don't hang out with that really matters sometimes. It's not what you do, but it's not what you do, but what you don't do that matters. And so my senior year, I just sort of cut everybody out. I just ghosted them and just was generally friendless for my senior year in high school. And that really allowed me a sort of a fresh reset, get very inward, not very salesy of a personality. And then my freshman year in college, I met this first millionaire who was my trumpet professor, actually, Steve Goforth, amazing man out of Oklahoma City. He's now since passed. But he really revolutionized my life and encouraged me to, instead of listening to music, start listening like Zig Ziglar, books on tape, stuff like that, and really helped enrich my life and my mentality. And from that sort of served as sort of a projection into my early 20s when I met my next mentor.
So that's a fantastic way to answer that question. A big part of it was mentors who had been there before and done it before. I mean, and you went out and sought that help. That's also different from what I hear. It wasn't like you just sort of fell into it. You went looking for that kind of help to make that kind of growth.
Yeah, yeah. So the first one came. I don't want to give myself too much credit. First one kind of came like accident. So
Okay.
I was a trumpet performance major in college, and I was sitting there at practice, and this guy who was also first chair in like the City Philharmonic, just an amazing player. I come to his house, and he's got like a fleet of Cadillacs, and this is back in the '90s, so everyone wanted a Cadillac. He had a whole fleet of them. He had a beautiful home. He had a ranch and everything. And he's a trumpet instructor. I'm thinking, where's this guy making this money? I know professional musicians don't make this kind of money. So I finally asked, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? He said, well, I have a side business where I do this and this and this. And uh, and so that sort of came up by accident. But had I not asked that question, like, tell me what you're doing, like, you've got to tell me what you're doing. I don't know what sort of instilled that need for that question to happen. But that really changed things there. I mean, and there's a couple other circumstances. Let me just kind of throw these out there on the table for the times when I could have been quiet, but I spoke up. Um, I was in college. I think coming into my sophomore year, and I was back home, and I had taken the same summer job that I had the year before, which is telemarketing. And obviously, telemarketing is just a job where you just get beat up all day, every day, hundreds of times a day, but maybe you get a sell or two. And I actually happen to be fairly good at telemarketing. So I went back for a second summer of it, and you do three training days before you start your summer. And so I put the headphones on, headphones like this, sat down in the chair to begin pressing the auto dialer. And there was just something, I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit or what it was, but there was some sort of urge in me. It may be in a word that Steve had spoken to me that said, Rick, you don't need this. And all I did is I took my headphones off, I stood up, the floor center manager was right there, and I said, I just don't need this. And so I walked out, and the very next day I started my first business. I don't know what that was. I suspect it was the Holy Spirit because it seems like it was the right thing to do at the time, and it's the right thing now. And so I learned very quickly that the thing that you least want to do is the thing you most need to do next, probably. And so the thing I least wanted to do was that discomfort. Like I was going to make great money doing call center work, but I went and started my first business, and things sort of took off from there. And finally, the way I met my mentor in my 20s, really my early 30s, I think, Kyle. I was in a I was I We had some business success, and I just realized that I need to be giving more than I was. And so we started giving away a lot of money to charities, just really to prevent greed as well from taking place. And I found myself on these really great boards, and I was up in Kansas City. We were fogged into the airport. There was another guy there that was about 20 years older than me, sitting across from me with his family and his grandkids. And so I just struck up a conversation with him. And it being from Houston as well, just like me, had commonalities there, and we just struck up a friendship initially, and turned into a mentorship. And he actually ended up being mentored by one of the great billionaires of the world prior to that, in not only business but also philosophy and human action, human nature. And he really poured into me. And it come to find out, he poured into hundreds of other young men in my situation. But I not instigated that conversation, and I kind of felt that. I felt that need that I should talk to that person. And I was wanting to disobey, but I thought, no, I better obey. I'm stuck here, right? I'm fogged in for 24 hours. But so I went in and initiated it, and it's been so beneficial. If I look around at all the great relationships that I have in Houston and in my life, majority of them came from that conversation.
Wow. So you always have to be looking for that. But the the way that you said that, that it was the Holy Spirit that called you, do you feel that you were called to go start this business? Or do you feel like maybe the business is a stepping stone on the way to what you've truly been called for?
Yeah, so I grew up a Wesleyan, and one of the things that John Wesley said is, "Hey, I just want to be useful. I just want to be useful." And I guess that's a lot of the sort of gap work that you have in your life. You're not always called to do something, right? You don't know what you're called to do in every single situation. Most people aren't. And so you have to figure out, like, how am I going to be useful while I'm waiting for that divine call? Because
Yeah.
that divine call may never come, right? You may just have this inspired word of God in front of you that you can dwell from. You may never hear the voice. Now, I have heard the voices in other circumstances, but to start the business was just an act of me being useful and running away from that lack of resources that I'd grown up with. I knew I didn't want, and so maybe that desire was Holy Spirit driven. because as soon as I started seeing some financial success, someone else gave me a book by Randy Alcorn called The Treasure Principle, um, and where it says your treasure, where your heart is, your treasure will be, or where your treasure is, your heart will be also. I think out of Luke 12:34, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And he says that the heart follows the treasure. That if you want your heart somewhere, you send your treasure first, and your heart will follow.
Hmm.
And so that made a lot of sense to me. Made a lot of sense to me. And so that started really impacting me probably 20 years ago, and that really changed a lot by how we live.
Nice. Okay. So you've got you take off, you start the business, you got 400 employees. Okay. This is the first business that you've built that we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, that's the one I started in college. Correct. Yeah.
Right. Take us through, to where you are today then, because you have that business. Now, do you still have that business? Did you sell that business? What happened there, and what was the next step?
Yeah, yeah. So around 2008, I believe, there's a gentleman that got into the White House who's also from the northern United States area, and he said that I'm going to penalize every employer that has over 50 employees. And so if you do
I
the
remember.
math, yeah, yeah. If you do the math, you realize that that 51st employee back then cost us something like $31,000 a month. So if you could get under 50, you would save 31,000. So economically, it's hard for one employee, that one difference maker, to earn $31,000 in profit to cover themselves. And so I just saw it as a game. I saw it as a game. Like, well, we've built the big business. It's been a number of years. The profitability really hasn't changed since. And let's see if we can get under 50. And so I think the first number was like 200, I believe, first. And then we got under 200, then we got under 50. And so we moved to more of an outsourced model. And that's really where we are today, is trying to outsource as much as possible. So for instance, about a year and a half ago, we started outsourcing like our property management business and our leasing business and our engineering business and our accounting for our properties. Just started outsourcing whatever we could, just to sort of shed complexity in the organization. And I think at some point, if you're an immature leader and you have some success, you want to sort of build this following, you want to build this kingdom that you can manage. Right, the more heads, the sexier it is. Um, and what I realized was, what I really want is, I really want a simple life where I can spend time with my kids doing the things I want to do. And so we just really shrunk things down, and converted from a business where we're operating buildings to we're being able to buy and develop our own buildings. So for instance, right now, a 50 yards that way, I've got about 180,000 square foot warehousing projects, logistics project that we're in the process of developing right now on 9 acres there. I'm sitting in another property that I own right now. I'm the only person. My daughter works here on occasion, but I'm the only person that comes here. This is an investment property and opportunity zone. But we're focused on the assets instead of the head count now. It's a much simpler way to live, just to outsource everything. Like, I don't need to build a big kingdom. My pride, I think the Lord's taking care of, or started taking care of my pride. My pride flares up on occasion. It can do that very, very well. But if I can get rid of that mentality where I've got to build a big kingdom, it things begin to take care of themselves, and life becomes pick up a little bit more joy.
I love what you're saying, and it's resonating with me so strongly. I'm almost in tears over it because I'm feeling what you're saying right now, especially the part about the kingdom. I had real estate companies, and so it was the same thing. It was, the bigger you get, the more people, and you take that as your worth. When you're in the middle of that, it's like, hey, this is where my value is coming from. So I have to build my kingdom up. When that particular event happened that you're talking about, and things drastically changed, a lot of us had to make changes like that. And then the change was so difficult because we weren't rooted somewhere else with our value strong enough. I know for me, my faith was nowhere near where it needed to be. It wasn't where it is now. And so I felt like my self-worth was going out the window, as we were trimming to hit that. Was that something that you went through at all, or have you seen that happen? Or did your faith get you through that?
So I'm always the type of person that looks for putting constraints on things. So you study the great artists. There's always constraint on the creativity. If you're building organizations and there's no constraints whatsoever, you can do anything. You're not really going to. A, enjoy it, and B, you're not going to have the excitement that you could have by putting constraints on it. So again, one of the constraints was like trying to get under 50 employees from 400. That was a big constraint, and
Yeah.
staying under 50. Um, and so one of the things that I found helpful is thinking about opportunity costs. What is the drag on my time? What is the drag on my schedule? What could I be doing? Again, I was for a long time, probably for 15, 20 years, I was, working 8 hours a day. My day job doing 8 hours a day, generally board work. Again, if you're someone who's giving away large amounts of money, you can get board seats fairly easily, and especially if you've had a little bit of worldly success, because the business skills that you learn out in the real world, um, they translate fairly well to nonprofit work. And anyone that's built up any amount of competency should be going to volunteer for nonprofits. But you have to realize that there's certain work um, that's temporary nature. There's certain work that is permanent nature. There's certain work that is immortal in nature. There's certain work that is mortal. They mean it's dying in nature.
Hmm.
And the more time you can shift to this immortal, this soul basis, rather than working on sort of in the natural world, the more fulfillment you're going to have. Because what I discovered was that relevance is always connected to indestructibility. And if you can set your sight on something that's indestructible in the future, you can have a more fulfilling present. But if all you do is try to put together and cobble together things here to serve you, you're never going to be focused on eternity. And all you get if you're not focused on eternity is hell.
Wow, that was incredibly powerful in a very short span right there. That you packed a lot into that. I appreciate that. Um, okay, so let's get back to your story. You've condensed everything. You've outsourced. You've complied, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's still working for you. Now, do you find yourself at that point going, "Hey, this is better"? Because I have more time, or do you find yourself mourning the loss of the employees and going, now what do I do? Because my growth is so limited.
Yeah. Yeah. The way that the transition from headcount to sort of assets started
Hmm.
was we were managing real estate, managing leasing and accounting and engineering and property management for a number of wealthy families and even institutions, even the federal government for a while. And we actually spun the federal business out. That's why I say for a while, but we still have that business. That's the one that eventually became the business in 6 states. The idea that we could do a really good job really took root when there was a wealthy family who we managed some high-rise and mid-rise products for, and we also helped them buy some other properties that are sort of in the RE park space and some other asset types. And over about a 2-year time period, we made them 15 million in profit. And we were getting pennies. We were getting a few $100,000 for the services, but they made 15 million just like that. And the guy that ran that family came to me and said, "Hey Rick, like we love what you're doing. We would love to invest with you." And I said, "Well, I'm not really investing too much. I'm just trying to run my business." He said, "Well, I have these other friends." And so this group, they got together 11 family offices. So family offices, for those that don't know, they're wealthy families. When they have so much money, they have to put together a separate company to actually manage that. So these are accountants that are only managing like the 401k accounts and paying the insurance on the house and paying for the jets and all that kind of stuff. So it's a business to run your personal life. So this is what a family office is. And there were 11 of them. There were 11 of them. And they're still invested with me. And they just said, "Hey, Rick, whatever you invest in, we'll match it. In fact, we'll do 10 times. So you come up with a dollar, we'll match it with $10. Well, $9 is really what it was." And so all of a sudden I had some leverage on the few dollars that I could save up and put together. And so what made that happen was I was able to take some competency. I was able to make other people money. I wasn't making a lot of money myself, but took some competency and paired it with some integrity. And competency and integrity over the long run become your identity. Competency and integrity in the long run become your identity. And so because I handled myself in with some integrity, and I handled myself with some competency, and I made them money, they put that faith in me. And so we ended up investing in a number of other real estate ventures together, funds, operating businesses, things like that over the long term. And I was able to go and find some other investors as well to pair with that. And that really worked out well. But it started because I did a good job at what my regular job was. And I got noticed because I had integrity and I had competency.
So I know that I read in your bio that you had at some point where you sacrificed like 90% of your wealth or your assets. Net worth is what it was. Net worth. There we go. Are we at that point in the story now, or is there another step between? Because right now it sounds like you're doing pretty well. You know, you've minimized overhead. You're running efficient. You're building assets that are making you money. I mean, from the guy sitting over in this seat, I'm like, looks pretty good, you know. But how do you go from there to that?
So the story that I just told you with the investments and stuff, that happened probably within 36 months of me making that major sacrifice.
Uh,
What happened, just a little bit of background, I just had some tragic things happen. I ran for U.S. Congress and just was defeated, just embarrassed on national news. Both my largest businesses, we lost 75% of our accounts, more or less, over a 2 year time period. My marriage was in shambles. I ignored my kids for months at a time while I was running for Congress, and just things were not working out very well for me. And went through some health issues that really impacted the functioning of my mind. And so just everything inside and outside just were not working. I was praying for healing. I was praying literally for a drop of the ocean, a drop from the ocean of God's wisdom to invade my mind. Just nothing, nothing at all. But I also looked at my dad who had about 3 years after I started the first business, he came on full time to help me build that business, and had retired 5 years beforehand. So um, this is a number of years into running the first business, but 3 or 4 years before these investors kind of found me. Um, and my dad is just his health had declined. He had nothing to do. It's just a bad scenario there. And so I said, Dad, I said, like, let's get you back in this. And so I had this federal business that we were working in a number of states. And it just made sense because my dad was a veteran. He was actually a disabled veteran. And I'm just a son of a disabled veteran. And they don't give you any marks for that. And I said, Dad, like, why don't I just give you 100% of that business? You need a job, you need a purpose, you need a little bit of clout, you have to have a position. Um, and I'll just walk away. And I've got to go rebuild this other business anyway. And I got to heal my marriage. I have to depend on God to heal my marriage. And I've got to fix all these other things. And let me just do that. And so, and what we worked with the government liaison, worked some attorneys, and one fell swoop, I sent him over the paperwork. And I said, Dad, you're back in the game. And at that point, I gave him my entire ownership in my largest business, which was about 90% of my net worth. It was
wow.
my identity. It was everything that I had built up for the most part. And I had this other business that was just bleeding cash like crazy. Like there's no money there. And I was literally weeks away from just losing everything. But I did that
Mm.
because what I had read in all the great traditions was that if you need a revelation, you have to make a sacrifice. And no one ever takes that charge seriously. You go read it in Homer, you read it in Scripture, present your bodies as a living sacrifice in the Pauline Dictate. You read this, but you don't believe it. You don't believe it. And I thought, well, what if I believed it? What if I believed it? My dad has a need. He needs some relevance. He needs something to do. I have a need. Like I've got to get my eyes off myself and I've got to put my focus on my kids. And I got to have one thing to fix, not 100 things to fix. And so that's the way it worked out. And so, again, very, very quickly after that, again, I less than 36 months. It may have been 18 months from the time of that I started having conversations with these very wealthy families who I'd made a ton of money for while I was just bleeding cash, and that really helped turn things around. And I can only say that part of that revelation that I got was not only a sort of a spiritual high, but also a high in my marriage. My marriage has never been stronger. My family has never been stronger. My business has never been stronger. My balance sheet has never been stronger. My mind has never been clearer than what it is today. Those all became only after I made a sacrifice of the very thing through which I thought my value was based, was that business.
Wow. Okay, so I mean that sounds like a pretty good strategic move to put your business in somebody else's name. So we won't go there, but I get kind of the progression, that you're going through for sure. Um, the I'm curious
Well, and
as to.
and, and I just for
Oh
clarity,
yeah,
I
no, go
walked
ahead.
I walked I walked entirely away from that business. I wasn't employed by it. I didn't help it. I still don't help it. It's just it's in his name, and he manages all the staff and everything. But yeah, it's something where I realized I couldn't keep 25%. I couldn't keep 10%. All I could have technically, but I had to
Gotcha.
just get rid of all of it. I had to get rid of all of it. I don't need the title. I don't need any of that stuff. I just got to get rid of it.
So it was a purging, cleansing thing, to start over.
Yeah, yeah. So the only thing worth sacrificing is the thing you most need. The thing you most need, think you need, right? If you sacrifice something that you really didn't need, it's not a worthy offering. In
Right.
fact, an improper sacrifice becomes a curse. That's the problem. We give up these things that are meaningless to us. We say, "Hey, I'm gonna fast chocolate, or I'm gonna fast Coke, or I'm gonna fast caffeine for 24 hours." I mean, you may want those things, but you don't really need those things.
Yeah.
We've got to sacrifice to God that thing that we least want to let go. Like that's the only thing that's worthy of sacrificing.
Right.
It's got to be the
Yeah,
first fruits.
exactly. My wife teases me because I'll be like, yeah, I'm going to sacrifice fish. And she goes, you don't eat fish. Well, and I'm not going to now either. So
Sure.
no, no, I'm with you completely. The where does where does the book come in? And more importantly, where does the book come from? Is it all of this put together that goes into the book?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So from the time I met that mentor in college,
Huh?
who encouraged me to start listening to books and reading books, I I counted up. I read over 1,000 books. I'm thinking, well, there's got to be principles there. And then I've been able to interact with some really very highly successful people. In fact, in this room, we've had the Secret Service in this room a number of times. Just kind of give you an idea about what level of success. Um, and I don't say that as a bragger, but I'm just telling like God's put me like in some really interesting places that most people don't get a chance to experience. And I'm able to hear lessons and principles that maybe aren't accessible. So I thought, like, what if I could take those hundreds of conversations, what if I take the 1,000 books and sort of distill it into like the densest, most possible book that you can imagine, and try to get that in a way that's a form that's actionable for men that are looking to build a life of meaning. And so that's where it really came from. It started off as a 900-page just tome, and I spent 2 years writing it. It took me 2 years to write this, and so uh, just collating it and going through multiple rounds of edit, trying to get it down, just trying to get it denser and denser and denser, and also get it to more of a practical, usable format, is really what happened and how that book came to be. But I just want to help men find meaning, and men that are looking around that just haven't ever seen an example of success or don't have a vision of what's possible in their lives, that are just listening to all these academics online. Like, hey, I'm not that smart, but I've done some stuff, and I've made a lot of failures. I'm going to be open about my failures, and like I'm going to share with you exactly the mistakes I made, exactly what some of the better men that I've met said that they would have done. And and I've tested this out. I've tested, like, I'm the guinea pig, and it's all in one book. And so that's what my newsletter's about. That's what my book's about. And I've got probably 10 practical, like, kind of downloadable tools that are embedded in the book as well. Just exercises men can go to cultivate meaning and purpose and drive and motivation in their life.
Nice. Okay. It's the 9 steps to build a life of meaning, how to unlock your mind, happiness, power, and your enemy's demise. Now, when I first saw that title, I was like, hmm. Then I was, going through your bio, like I said, and you give a piece of advice about how important it is to choose one worthy enemy. So, are those two things linked? And tell me about that.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, let me give you the scriptural mandate first, and then I'll walk you through sort of the
Perfect.
the the, the theoretical and the practical. Um, there there's a line by Paul, I believe it's in Romans chapter 12, maybe verse 2 or verse 3, something like that. He says, "Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Hate what is evil and cling to what is good." And they're separated, in my version anyway, by semicolon. Now, those of us that are uneducated, we grew up in the public school system. We're always told when we see a semicolon, with the ones that smart people use, you always just assume that's sort of an equal sign. Like those are kind of equally weighted.
Okay.
And so in my simpleton mind, I'm reading that. I'm like, okay, so hate what is evil is to cling to what is good. Like the only way to get a bit of good is to hate the evil, and hate requires action. And so if I'm going to live in a fully balanced life, I've got to be able to hate the evil that I see around me, but also cling to the good. And if I'm not hating good, if I'm not hating evil, I can never love good. And if I don't love good, I can never really truly hate evil. And they sort of seem to be like sort of in a tandem that you've got to give and take. It's like you never can embrace love without unembracing all the likes. Um, a thousand likes are never worth an ounce of love,
Hmm.
for instance. And so you have to kind of reject those lower things to embrace the higher things. And so life is always lived in the balance. But when I started studying a lot of the men that are struggling, men that are struggling and ask a woman out, for instance, struggling in embracing a relationship, struggling with their families because they never were, received sort of the fatherly relationship that they would hope to have. They never had that vision of what a man could be. They're looking around. They're seeing this toxic masculinity. They're seeing this wealth hype culture. They're seeing all these things out there that are not sort of a godly stance on what meaning really is. And so, as I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking, well, everyone tells you to set a vision, set a goal, but men that have never seen a vision or goal of what's possible, they're not going to have anything to aim at. And so, how do we get around that? And so, I realized that the problem is not necessarily a vision. The problem is comfort. In fact, there's a certain type of comfort, this sort of rejection of fear, rejection of embracing pain, that's keeping us sort of confined about what's possible. In fact, I decided that I need to rip away the comfort now enslaving men's potential. That's sort of what my mission statement is. I want to rip away the comfort now enslaving your potential. And so I realized that the only way to get through that is to do something. Like you've got to have action. You have to have
Right.
action in your life. You don't know where you're going to go, what you want to do. You don't have a vision. We have to create some action. And the only action that we all have embedded in this is one that comes because we're made in the image of God, and that's to hate evil. Because the purpose of light is to invade the darkness. The purpose of the good man is to invade the evil. Like that's definitionally what light and good do. They're invaders. They go in there and they solve they remedy the evil and they remedy the darkness that they see. And so we're built to do that as men. We're built to go and address those injustices they see around us. And so what I encourage men to do is to look for that thing around them, as Andy Stanley says, that breaks your heart. What is that greatest atrocity that you see around you that ideally hurts the most vulnerable around you, right? You've got the orphans, and you also have the widows, sort of the two biblical groups of individuals that are the most you're called to take most care of. Um, what is this? What about that sex website that doesn't respect minors? What about the child trafficking that you see all around you? What about those drugs that your mother and her friends and your neighbors are all addicted to? What about the alcohol that's poisoning your relationship and your marriage? Like you have literal evil manifestations all around you that should, if you're a rightly ordered man who doesn't know what he wants to do, they should at least bother you. In fact, some of them should break your heart. And if you can figure out what breaks your heart, you can name an enemy. And if you name a worthy enemy, an enemy that's worth giving your entire life for, at least for now, you somehow will be given the resources from heaven to go and attack that and go do battle against that. He'll put you in connection with the right people to help resource you. And eventually be able to cobble together some competency, cobble together some integrity to go and amass a full out battle against that evil manifestation. And in the end, if you pick a worthy enough enemy, you'll live a worthy enough life. And that's sort of what it means to pick a worthy enemy. You got to be savage. You got to be ruthless. You got to realize that the only way to truly love is to truly hate. In fact, a weak man who can never threaten anyone else can never truly love. Like it's a worthless love if you have a man that can't threaten anything. How are you going to defend the people that you love? You got to be willing to be a threat if you're ever to love. And so we see these balances, and we see the hate and the love, and the threat
Yeah.
and the love and the right balance. And we see this where starting in the biblical corpus.
Great answer. And wow. I mean, that's quite the premise for everything that you're putting out here. It makes sense because, to boil it down, it's almost like you need a bad guy. You need something where you're gonna focus your energy, just in terms of accomplishing the mission. But I realize you took that, a lot deeper, into um, I love the what breaks your heart
Yeah.
scale, because I think that all of us at some point during the day, your regular day, you're going to come across something where it just almost brings you to tears because you can't believe what's going on in the world. And then there's a lot of us who have that just within us, where there's something going on in here, that breaks your heart that you need to work on. So there's a lot of men who feel broken, who feel kind of left behind right now, and a
Yeah.
lot of them listen to this program. I have a lot of guys who fall into that category, and I know that just from our private groups and discussions and things like that. And so a lot of what a lot of what they're looking for, to be honest with you, Rick, is hope, in some capacity. Because right now, all I do is I get up every day, I go to work, I come home, I get in a fight about something I didn't do. I watch Netflix and I zone out because I don't even want to be there. I'm a ghost to my kids. I'm a zombie with my wife. Why am I doing this? And they feel like they're just kind of waiting to die. And what you're talking about here is a way of sort of naming your enemy, building yourself up to go fight it, and maybe taking that back. Am I putting too much on that?
Yeah. If you can't understand what a father is, you can certainly understand what an enemy is. Like we all know what enemies are. There's a reason why all the great stories tell you about a boy knight that goes and defeats a big ugly dragon.
Right.
Like we all understand that. Every kid that hasn't even read the story understands that story. And so we've got to figure out a way to energize. We got to build that sort of fire in the gut life. And that fire in the gut spreads. It spreads over the internet, it spreads through books, it spreads through two men working together to accomplish a mission, to go defeat something that's worthy, that needs to be defeated.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to figure out a way to do that. But something interesting happens too. Whenever you get that sort of fire in the gut type of life to go track an enemy, you're able to live better. In fact, one of the things I start off the book saying is that you're commanded to live lavishly on the outliers of love and evil. That you don't send one rose when you should send 100. One rose would be enough, but 100 is what's right. Someone to a woman you really love. So too, when you go fight an enemy, you don't send one bullet when you could send 100. One bullet might get the job done, but 100 is what's right. We all know deep down that we're supposed to live lavishly on the outliers of love and evil. And so if we take those sort of premises and we live like that, we realize that hope is something that invades. That if you can look at someone like Rick or Rory, and you look at us and you see how we live, you see how we speak, you see the passion we speak with, you have to agree that there's at least one or two other people in the world that have some hope. Some hope. There's like someone has hope out there. Like it may not be you, but there may be some hope out there.
Right.
But here's the promise. And this is the promise that's going to blow your mind if you're someone that's hopeless. If you listen and you remember this. If a drop of hope exists somewhere, it threatens all threats everywhere. If a drop of hope exists somewhere, it threatens all threats everywhere. So that my drop of hope can come through the camera, can come through the internet to invade your hopelessness. And as long as my hope exists somewhere in the world, your hopelessness is at risk. In fact, it's already being defeated. It's already being defeated. And if there's other men like me and like Rory, and there's other men that you come across that have some ounce of hope, your hopelessness is being defeated before you ever know it, before you even hear those words of hope. And so I would encourage you to think about that if a drop of hope exists, not only my hopelessness being defeated, but all threats. Hope is a drop of hope is a de-threatener. It is the death of threats, period, is what it is. And it's possible because it actually exists. All it has to do is exist at one point, just like light. 1 ounce of light threatens all darkness. 1 ounce of good threatens all evil.
That is fantastic. I love that. I'm going to steal that from you. I'm just letting you
You
know.
should, please do. Please
I'm
do.
absolutely
Yeah.
stealing that. But that is very, very, very well said. The back to the book, the 9 steps to build a life of meaning. And so on. The Are these 9 steps that you've come up with based on all of this experience and based on all of this belief and everything else? And it's kind of a cumulative. This is what will work for you. Is that kind of where this all came from?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is an actual genre. I suspect I may have accidentally created the genre. It's a self-improvement memoir is what it is. And so you start off and there's a couple of chapters that are primarily about me and some of the experiences that I've gone through. And some of them are just crazy, ridiculous things, crazy, ridiculous things. Um, and then we got a couple of chapters that deal with Alexander the Great, his downfall, then his ascent, stories you've never heard before. Even though
Hmm.
if you're an Alexander the Great professional, if you watch all the Netflix stuff, I guarantee you haven't heard some stuff I've got in the book. Uh, and so so you got Alexander the Great there, and then you've got a couple of stories that are dealing with myths and history. So there's two great stories, and I'll sort of give you a teaser on it. There's two great stories that are both myths and historical. One is, and they're both seascapes. One is the seascape story where Agamemnon is trying to leave the shores to go invade Troy after Helen of Troy has been kind of stole away, and he's got to make a sacrifice to the gods to get to do that. So that probably happened in history, and it definitely is a myth, right? Because Homer writes about it. But then there's another seascape that happens in the Bible that's also a myth and also history at the same time. This is the great scene when the disciples are on the water, and the disciples say, they're afraid, hey, we're all going to perish. And Christ wakes up and he stands up and he commands the storm, peace be still. And they're remarking to himself afterward, who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? That is, and I talk a little bit in the book about why that is also a myth and a historical event. And then the next two chapters have to do with competency and integrity. And we deal with a couple of historical figures there as well. George Washington and also Dr. Ben Carson. Dr. Carson also gave sort of the headline blurb of the book. He called it triumphantly hopeful. So that's really what I've got here.
Wow.
And so in the final two chapters get into a revelation and some personal story that ties everything that you already read back into my personal story. That is just basically a series of miracles that have happened, but also not only a mental or spiritual and sort of a relational resurrection, but also financial resurrection that happened. And so it's all sort of one tightly ordered story, sort of a hero's journey type of archetype, but it gives you lessons from history, lessons from philosophy. I even have some Bhagavad Gita language in there. And so it sort of gives you an education. Again, I'm trying to take 1,000 books and distill it down to one. I'm trying to take hundreds of conversations and put it into one.
Yeah.
And you're going to get like, this may be the densest book you've ever read, but I'm trying to make it as easy and practical as possible.
I was going to say, are we talking, book or are we talking book?
It's so this is it. This is it. I mean,
Oh, wow.
it's not that thick. Yeah, I think it's like 240 total pages with the forward and everything else in there. Yeah, yeah. So it's a fairly light read.
Excellent. Okay. Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal. I love the cover. That's great. I'm looking forward to reading this. I love what you've put into this. You went over earlier also, kind of why, you wanted to put it all together. I guess let me just ask this as we kind of start to wrap things up here. Let me ask this. As you write this book and you envision it getting into the hands of, the people that you're hoping it reaches, what would you like to see happen from having written this book and, the impact that it may have?
I want men to begin to have a passion for living, a passion for defeating evil, right? It's not that we live for ourselves, but we live for others, and a life not sacrificed is never really lived.
Hmm.
And so that's what sort of thing we've got to get our minds around is how are we going to give back? How are we going to, the only way to keep a life is to give your life away. Nothing that you're not giving away will ever really be yours, your life included. And so we've got to figure out a way to get that done. I want to see men serving. I want to see men serving their communities, serving nonprofits, serving their families. And I want to be able to see that. And that's going to be a tough way to sort of, measure that, right? I'm a man who likes to measure things. It's gonna be tough to do that. But I suspect that there's a promise at some point in the very distant future that your work will become your sight. You will understand the ramifications of everything that you've done, everything you've believed throughout your lifetime, either in this life or in the next. And that is my great hope. I wrote this book honestly thinking about, I'm a dad of three girls, and so I don't have any sons. I don't have any sons, and I don't have any brothers. And I honestly wrote it thinking about I need an instruction manual of how to become a man for these three future sons-in-laws that are going to be sort of in their early 20s, early 30s, something like that. And they need an instruction book on how to live. And even if I die before my daughters get married, I need something to leave behind for them. And so that's really what I was thinking about when I was writing this. Like, how do I get these men to really live? How I get them to become the type of men that I want my daughters to live? Because if you're a daughter of a guy like me, you're looking for a very specific type of man. It's not a weak man. And I suspect there are not very many boys that are sounding like someone like me right now running around out there. And I suspect it's very difficult for a couple to raise someone to become someone like me because we're all made in God's image, but we're all sort of uniquely different. And my girls are gonna be looking for someone that sort of thinks and acts and cares for them the way that I do. And I can't expect it to happen. If I can't find a man out there, I've got to build a man.
Hmm,
And so this is my instruction book on how to build a man.
nice. Nice. I love that. All right. I got a son-in-law of my own coming up here in October. So I feel that. So congratulations on the kids too. And my condolences on three girls in a row. I have one. If I'd have had even a second one, I probably wouldn't be here to talk to you. So I had a daughter and two boys, and let me just tell you, the idea that boys are easier, totally true. 100% true. Absolutely positively true. I
I
don't know how you're
believe you.
doing it.
I
How you
believe
doing
you. I believe. Well, come to think about that, I think about like, what would it be like to have a boy? Like, I don't know what I would do with a boy. Now, I'm a nervous wreck about these girls. So I've got one that drives. I got two others in middle school, one going to high school, and I just think about all the problems out there. Boys, I'm like, you just do whatever you want to do. Just you know. But yeah, I'm a nervous wreck about these girls. But God has a plan for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet he's got a plan for you too, in the middle of all this. So, all right.
Fingers
Power to
crossed.
you, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Listen, you've shared so much. I can't wait to read the book. I have not yet, unfortunately, but man, I'm loving everything I'm hearing. I think there's a lot of people who are probably, hearing this going, all right, let's check this out. This is good. Guys, you got to check out this book. I'm telling you right now. I will check it out. I'll be posting about it in my private group. We'll be talking about it. But you guys need to go get this. We're going to have the website and everything else to be able to go get this. We have those links right in the Podmatch setup over there. So I'll
Yes.
get those from you. I'll make sure we have them after the show
Okay.
and make sure that they're in
Yeah.
the show notes, of course. Do you want to give anybody contact information now before I ask you the last question and we start to wrap up?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my website's rickwalker.com. So easy to remember, rickwalker.com. I do a free newsletter. I just enter your email address about every 2 weeks or so. I'll send you one email. It's really simple. So I'm going to give you three bangers. So these are quotes, and I actually encourage you in the email to steal them. So I'm either finding quotes or I'm making up quotes like you heard today. I encourage you to steal them. And I give you two videos. So one's generally going to be sort of an educational video, and one's going to be sort of a sit-down interview with someone generally of high influence or high capacity. And then I'll either write like an in-depth essay or I'll give you some questions for self-reflection in that. That's about every other week. And then the book's available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Walmart. I think there's an ebook, paperback, hardback, and then also the audiobook should be out by the time this airs after July 5th. And if you're someone that can't afford the book and you're in the US, reach out to me. I would love to give you a free book. I don't want money to ever get in the way. So if I can bless you with a book, please reach out to me on social media and just let me know how I can be of service to you and your family.
That's awesome. Appreciate that. And I'm sure everybody else does too. All right. So listen, Rick, you've unpacked a ton. As we kind of wrap this up, let me just ask you, is there anything that I didn't ask you? Is there anything that we talked about? Maybe you want to drive home a little harder, or is there maybe just something you want to have as a leave behind, a nugget or something for my listeners? I'm going to give you the floor for the last couple minutes here, sir. Go for it.
All right, Rory. Um, so there's a lot of men that have been hurt, a lot of men that have hurt others, I would imagine, in an audience like this. And sometimes we let that get us down. Sometimes we don't know how we're going to rebound from it. And you find yourself in the same situation as the atheist that looks around and looks at all the pain, all the sickness, all the disease in the world, the childhood cancers, and they never look at the doctor who was made to heal children of that. The doctor's act of healing is in itself a beautiful act. The act of forgiving someone else that has offended you is a beautiful act. In fact, the world is more beautiful because you forgave, because the offense originally exists. A perfect world is not a world that you'd want to live in. Just as a redeemed man is more perfect than a perfect man who's never needed to be redeemed.
Hmm.
I'm going to repeat that. A redeemed man is more perfect than a perfect man who never needed to be redeemed. Why is that? It's because the redeemed man has that essence of beauty that you find in the career of the doctor who heals. The redeemed man has that I don't know if je ne sais quoi is the right word, but that essence of the man who's able to forgive someone who offends him. There's that beauty that's present there that would never be present if the man had lived a perfect life of non-consequence. In fact, life is found in the contrast between your lowest lows and your highest highs. That's where joy is found. A monotonous life, man that was always good, can never live a life of joy. And so when we begin to think about what makes our life worthwhile, it's in part the redemption that we offer and the redemption that we accept. Because the more redemption that you accept, the more forgiveness that you accept through God and through the other people that are around you, the more beauty you invite in your life. And the man with the most beautiful story is the man who has the most enduring story in the end. You want a story with your life that is as beautiful as possible, a story worth your kids and your grandkids telling other people. Because without a beautiful story, you'll never have durability. And without the durability, you'll never have relevance. And without relevance, or at least the hope for relevance, you'll never have meaning. And so embrace the beauty of redemption, embrace the forgiveness. But let me also remind you of what makes a wise man. A wise man is the man who looks into the most distant future for the most valued reward that he can purchase with the currency of the present. I'm going to repeat that. Someone needs to write that down. Someone needs to
Hmm.
write that down. The wisest possible mind, the wisest possible man, is the man who looks into the most distant future for the most valued reward that he can purchase with the currency of the present. All you have is today. All you have is the hope for tomorrow, and yesterday is already gone. So if you can figure out a way to take a step towards your future, towards that most valuable, most distant reward, which I suspect many of you consider to be the coming of Christ, to coming to do what? To redeem, to for beauty to invade not only the world but also us as we're resurrected. A resurrected man, by the way, is more beautiful than a man who never needed to be resurrected. Ask Christ. Um, you, you begin
Yeah.
to see that the beauty that you would ever hope for is also that most distant reward and the most valuable thing that at one point is promised to come and invade and to resurrect everything. Everything bad becomes untrue. All the ugliness becomes beauty, and all the hopelessness becomes a hope that is so pervasive that you not only have to hope with it with your mind, but then you begin to see it and visualize it with your eyes. Your hope itself becomes reality. And that's the promise that we hold as men of faith and men of character and men that seek to build a life of meaning and meaning of beauty.
That was fantastic. That's a that is a great way to end right there. Um, Rick, thank you so much for coming in here for laying all this down for everybody. It's so much more than just talking about the book. I mean, talking about yourself, all the things that you believe in, the things that have happened to you that have gotten you where you are today. The whole story has just a ton of value, and I just can't thank you enough for coming in here, being authentic and open and honest, and just laying it all out for everybody. It's that's how people will pick it up and take it home with them. You know, when you leave it for them like that. So thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming on and doing that.
It means a lot, Roy. I sure appreciate you. Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you. Folks, that's been another powerful episode of the Power Man podcast. The reason we keep bringing these powerful men on with these powerful messages is because, you know, we are joined in wanting you folks to succeed in your mission, which is to be a better protector, a better provider, a better leader tomorrow than you are today. It's to be a better father, a better husband, a better man tomorrow than you are today. Folks, the reason we want that for you is because you have value and because you're worth it. And at some point, you're going to have to believe it. Until next time.